From the Detroit Free Press, it's Wednesday, February 17th. Here are today's top stories, presented by Bush's Fresh Food Market. Bush's has over 4,000 Michigan products, including the freshest fruit and vegetables, meat, seafood, and baked goods. Stop by one of Bush's 16 locations for the personal service you expect from your neighborhood grocer.
I'm Susan Tompor, and I'm a columnist at the Detroit Free Press. All the talk about a third stimulus check is driving some people who had a very miserable 2020 to try to file their tax returns early this year. Why? The IRS will use your income and other information on your 2020 federal income tax return to calculate your third stimulus payment. If the 2020 return has been processed by the time the stimulus payments are issued, that's the return the IRS will use. Otherwise, the IRS will go with information on the 2019 federal income tax return. If you made more money in 2019 than last year, you might get a small stimulus check. But taxpayers shouldn't panic here and feel they must rush to file their 1040 in the next week or two. After all, the stimulus program still hasn't been passed by Congress. Many people can still file on April 15 and be okay. The good news is the IRS is going to be able to take the 2020 returns into account later this year. If you're owed extra stimulus money under the current plan, you'd still get it later, even if you filed that 1040 on April 15th.
This is Neeraj Warikoo of the Detroit Free Press with some news about a change in a religious practice. On Ash Wednesday, Catholics across Detroit may get ashes sprinkled over their head rather than being smudged on their forehead in the form of a cross as it's usually done. That's because there's concerns about COVID transmission. And so the Archdiocese, on recommendations from the Vatican, is saying that priests now have the option to sprinkle the ashes over their head during the Mass instead of placing them on their forehead. The Archdiocese stressed, however, that this is an optional practice. If you still want to smudge crosses on the forehead, you can do so, they said. For more information, visit freep.com.
For the Detroit Free Press, I'm Kerry Jr. II. At the Free Press, we believe it's incredibly important to document what's happening during this coronavirus pandemic. So we're doing that with our podcast entitled We Lived It. Recently, we released an episode about how students have been dealing with school during this pandemic. Here's a clip.
When I think about the past month, I feel like maybe there's been a few positive things to come out of this, but I just feel like I learned how to adapt. Everybody has to adapt to change, and a lot of times, maybe during normal times, people adapt to change more slowly, but during these times, you really had to adapt to something completely different in a really small amount of time. So that's something that everyone needs to get used to. At the beginning of the pandemic, I stayed home for 3 months straight. Didn't go out anywhere. Didn't see anyone. If I could get through that, then I'm pretty sure I can make it through the rest of the school year, right? It's not going to be awesome, but hopefully by the end of senior year, then everything will be over and I'll at least be able to have a decent graduation. Anyway, I need to go finish my homework for today. And those are my thoughts. That's pretty much it.
You can find We Lived It on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And check out freep.com for more.
This is Detroit Free Press auto critic Mark Phelan. The U.S. Army wants to develop a fleet of stealthy, silent, and deadly electric vehicles, and it's looking for help from the auto industry. Army Brigadier General Ross Kaufman told me electric vehicles provide a clear tactical advantage on the battlefield. They're quieter than internal combustion engines, making it easier to approach the enemy unannounced. They also resist infrared observation because batteries and electric motors generate less heat than conventional engines. Combat EVs face challenges, though. The Army needs them to go as far and refuel as fast as vehicles burning fossil fuels. That'll require new kinds of chargers that work fast. On top of that, the chargers must be mobile, so they can follow the troops and vehicles as the battlefront moves. The goal is EVs that can get a full charge in 10 to 15 minutes, the same time it takes to pump a tank of fuel. The Army's Ground Vehicles Development Center in Warren, Michigan, wants companies that have worked on EVs to bring their expertise and build on it to make electrified military vehicles practical.
For more stories from the Detroit Free Press, be sure to check out freep.com. That's FREEP.com. If you're a fan and want to support our quality local journalism, subscribe. Go to freep.com/special offer.